Politics, simply put, is the decision-making process by which who gets what is determined. And for generations, Black Americans have fought and died to have a seat at that table. Today, the impact of Black women and women of color in politics is so great, they've been labeled the backbone of the Democratic Party. But what about Black men? Well, my guests today are here to answer that question, as well as encourage more Black men to get involved in the process. Because, as a wise man once said, we are the change we seek. Alan Ellison, thank you so much for being with me today on All Things Men. Alan, you mentioned your interest in public service was directly tied to the work your mother did with the disabled. What work did she do, and why did that have such an impact on you?
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and thank you for that question. When I was a kid, my mom would often take me to her job. And one of the things that she would do on her job was she would teach people with disabilities how to live on their own. And oftentimes I got a chance to see and get to know people who others would see as like some type of burden or something like that. And I got a chance to just know who they were as individuals and learn that, you know, they have special gifts, special abilities. And I began to just see them as just, you know, any other human. And so for me, it taught me that, you know, we have to be able to look past people's exterior, look past the surface and see a person for who they are. And for me, I just, you know, I've always kind of like been that kind of person who would always try to find the good and the positive inside of each and every person.
Well, you talked about your mom. Let's talk about your dad. You say you got your determined and dedicated work ethic from him. That's one thing I want you to talk about, but also talk about the deal you made with him when you were 11.
Yeah, so my dad, he was always pushing me to be better, to be greater. And you know, he told me, he said, Alan, you can have whatever you want, but you're gonna have to earn it. So I had to always work for everything that I got. When I was a kid, I must have been about 11, 12 years old. I used to work with him on cars. He painted cars. He was a mechanic. And so he told me to take out, you know, an engine out of a car. And, you know, the 12-year-old, I don't know how to take an engine out of a car, but he gave me all the tools that I needed. And that was like a summer project. So I ended up taking an engine out of a car. But I also did other things with him. Like I would wash cars, I would cut grass. And, you know, it seemed that it was harsh because I never got paid anything. He just kind of just worked me. He said, I put a roof over your head and I feed you. That should be payment enough. But, and then this one time he made a deal. He said, listen, I want you to learn how to play the piano. And he said, if you learn how to play 2 songs by Christmas, I would get you a go-kart. And so I learned how to play This Little Light of Mine and Amazing Grace. And I thought that was the end of that, but I didn't know that he was going to actually go and start a church, and I would end up playing the piano ever since.
How about that? Do you remember the germ of the idea that got you to go into politics?
Yeah, actually, it was 2001. I was sitting in an American government course with Dr. Fitzgerald. He was a historian, but he taught American government. And at the time, I was an education major, and he was talking about how to make maximum impact and how to impact the world around you through policy. And the way he talked about making impact, it resonated with me because I have always been the kind of person who wanted to maximize my gift. And my gift is helping people. So when he talked about maximizing and making impacts in the community around you, in the world around you, I immediately went and changed my major from education to political science. And that was in 2001. I ended up finishing my undergraduate degree in political science in 2007. And from there, I just kind of always been immersed in policy in some type of way. I've acted as an advocate in Washington, D.C. On the issues of economic empowerment, on the issues of economic justice, safe water for communities here in Florida. So I've kind of always been around it. It wasn't really until like 2018 that I really took it to another level to actually run for the United States Congress.
Let's talk about that 2018 race to represent Florida's 17th congressional district. That race, although you didn't win, became the wind beneath your wings. Why?
Mhm. Well, it was interesting because in 2018, I wasn't really about to run. I was actually looking to open my business, my salon and spa business, because I'm also a cosmetologist. But the Democratic nominee passed away 30 days before the election, and my phone started ringing. People started calling saying, Alan, you need to maybe put your name in the hat. I'm sure there's going to be a special election. So I called around to the DECs and found out that yes, there was going to be a special election because the young lady passed away 30 days before the election. And so whenever I did, I gained a great deal of support for it. There was a special election with four other candidates. I beat all four with 52% of the vote. And by the time I won the special election, the ballots for the general election were already printed. And so I actually ran a 28-day campaign in 2018 against a three-term state senator who had been campaigning for the seat for over a year. And although I didn't win, I did receive 117,000 votes in 28 days in the state's largest congressional district and the most red congressional district without my name on the ballot. And so that was the story behind what kind of lit a fire up under me and gave me the idea that if we were to work hard enough, if we were to reach enough people with the message that I have, we could definitely make a tremendous amount of impact and raise a lot of awareness on a lot of issues that matter to so many.
Alan, let's talk about the future. You've announced you're running against Senator Marco Rubio. In that race also is Congresswoman Val Demings. Both of them are big names. How do you plan to attack that and that people know who you are?
Well, one of the things that we do is we are very engaging in our campaign. I've actually been running for 11 months now. I started last year, so I'm the first candidate to jump into the race, actually almost 8 months longer than Congresswoman Val Demings. And so what I do is I just become the most engaging candidate running for the United States Senate. We have a monthly town hall discussion on the issues. We have a weekly online discussion called Fridays for Florida. And on Fridays for Florida, we're just talking about the issues that matter to Floridians. On Twitter, we have the Power Hour chat where every single week for an hour, I answer any and all questions that people are asking. And the reason this has had such a positive impact on our campaign is because I found out that most citizens in this country, and especially in this state, they feel overlooked by politicians. Most times you can ask a politician a question and via Twitter, Facebook, or send them an email, and usually you're not going to get a response back. What that does is it turns people off. It makes people feel disregarded. And when they get turned off, their morale is low. People tend to walk away from politics. And what we want to do is we want to inspire people. We want to get them to become politically engaged, because what we know is that the last federal candidate to win Florida was President Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012. There hasn't been a federal candidate that has engaged with the people in such a way to inspire them. And it's because of our engagement that not only am I faced with faced with running against Congressman Val Demings, but there are literally 22 other Democratic candidates. And out of all of the candidates, our campaign is the most engaging. We've generated the most support at the grassroots level. And because of our level of engagement and level of excitement about our campaign, we're reaching about 10 million people every 28 days. And that's even without mass media interviews, that's without corporate or party backing. We are a grassroots organization, and I continue to say that we're leading this movement because we're the most responsive, we're the most engaging.
Alan, we noticed in recent years the impact of Black women in politics. What do you think we need to do to get more young Black men like yourself involved in this arena?
Well, thank you very much for that question. First of all, I want to say I'm very appreciative of the hard work that our Black women have been doing, not only in our society and the workplace, but also in politics. And what I want to do is I want to encourage Black men to step up and do their part, get involved, get out and vote, but also take the opportunity to get into a race. It doesn't have to be Congress. It could be a mayoral race. It can be a county commissioner race. It can be a city commissioner race. But we have to have a seat at the table if we want to have the type of impact in our world to better, our friends, our families, and the people in our communities. If we continue to sit back and allow others to write policy, to write legislation that impacts our world, if we don't have a seat at the table, then we might get the short end of the stick. So, that's why I'm running. I want to make sure that each and every one of us, we have a voice that is reflective of who we are, and where we're trying to go.
Alan Ellison, thank you so much for being with us, and all the best, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Mayor Quentin Hart, thank you so much for being on All Things Man. You are the first African American mayor of Waterloo, Iowa, and you are in your third term. What are you doing that people keep putting you back into office?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I think it's making sure that I keep people first. I didn't run to be the first African American mayor. I ran to be the best mayor that this city's ever had. I have incredible experiences working on one side of town, living on the other side, but I've always tried to keep people first. So that's my recipe, getting out here, being accessible to people, but putting people first. And I think one of the places where people can go wrong in politics when it starts to become about you, but as long as you put people first, as long as you try to work with people from all sectors of this community, other communities, I think that's a good recipe for success as well.
Sir, what led you to get into politics in the first place?
Well, it was a factory that we had here locally that I believe that was some type of oil or chemical that was leaking from the factory. I didn't see any action taking place on it. Too many abandoned houses, lack of economic development in the area that I grew up in. But my experiences, whether through college, whether with dealing with people, and my faith got me to the point where I wanted to get into public office. But it's the road less traveled, because the first time I ran for a state seat, I lost. Second time I ran for a seat that the person that beat me was a city council person for that seat. I ran for her council seat. I lost again. Right. So I just got busy, rolled up my sleeves, was fortunate to put together programs that help impact the community. And I took the road less travel. I volunteered. I did everything I could, not for political office, but for community advancement. And then I finally won a council seat 2 years. And next year, 4 years, I ran unopposed. And then I ran in a 5-person race for mayor, because I thought that there is enough opportunity for the entire community to be successful, for children to be able to see signs of progress and development, for us to use out of the box opportunities to create programs that help move the community forward. And that if our south side is moving forward and our north side is not, that's a challenge. So how can we work together collectively for the entire city, think outside of the box, and make sure progress is seen everywhere?
Mr. Mayor, we're in the middle of this seemingly never-ending pandemic. How did that affect Waterloo? How did that affect the state of Iowa?
Well, Waterloo, we were placed in a national spotlight for COVID infections, our county. We had a packing plant with our workers there, who are our neighbors, our friends, our family members, and there wasn't enough that was being done, I believe, by our state government to help. So a lot of us went on national television to try to get this plant shut down. Once we did that, the governor provided no support, but the company, we started having conversations, and the company shut the plant down. I think there was over 1,000 or so cases at this plant. And then you add that to the family members that are working in our senior facilities and places. So we were facing some turbulent times. On a personal level, I ended up having COVID. My wife and, my parents, both over 80 years old, had COVID as well. So from a personal standpoint, from a professional standpoint, it's been extremely rough to try to guide this community, but we've done it. And I was fortunate enough to also be the League of Cities president for the state of Iowa, where we also had to take initiative to help other communities during this pandemic. And as you said, we're not out of the woods yet. We still have a ways to go, but we tried to do our best to make sure that people were safe. Our school system had to take bold stands. Us as a local government had to put in a mask mandate that was not supported by our governor. But when it comes to it, our job is for protection and safety. Waterloo, Iowa has 70,000 people, 16% African American, growing Bosnian, Burmese, Latino community. So we're very diverse. And we have spike numbers in those areas. So we had to put information in multilingual formats to get out here and reach people. But we did an incredible job, I believe, our staff and our city, of trying to combat COVID and still deal with its ramifications now.
You said 16% of African American in that community. Mayor, if you had every vote from them, you wouldn't have won. You had
Right.
to reach all kinds of people. How'd you do that?
Well, just relationships. I was fortunate, our high school, we had Black, white, Latinos in our high school, the historic Waterloo East. I have friends throughout this community. I've worked and partnered with the NAACP to the community colleges and the colleges. So I've been fortunate to have a diverse experience base and to work with people to actually get things accomplished. My parents came to Waterloo, Iowa from Mississippi to escape the turbulent times in the 50s and the 60s to come to Waterloo for work. And so, they just raised me to outwork anyone that I'm around, to develop partnerships that are all throughout this community, and to judge people by the content of their character. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not conscientious to the plight of African Americans and what we've faced over the years, but I think strategically understanding how to address our issues and get other people involved to starting to do that is something that I've been able to learn throughout my course of my life.
Your third term ends New Year's Eve. What happens? What's next for you?
Well, right now I'm entrenched in a very interesting election right now, going for my fourth term. So we've been out here getting people engaged, getting them out to vote. I was fortunate after my first election to run 2 times unopposed, but this time I do have an opponent, and we're just spreading the message about progress. $28 million worth of economic development per year since I took over office. Lawsuits with our police department is down over 90%. When I started, hired the first Black police chief, and we're starting to go back, redevelop neighborhoods that were forgotten about. And so, if people just go straight on the information and the facts of since I've been mayor, I think January 2nd, January 1st, I'll be right back here talking to you.
Mayor Quentin Hart, thank you so much and all the best.
Thank you.
The passage of the Reconstruction Acts by Congress after the Civil War made it possible for Black people to vote in the South. Now, before that, there were over 600,000 white voters in the South and no Black voters. Once the acts were passed, there were over 700,000 registered Black voters, making it possible for Blacks to hold office locally and statewide. Early Black congressmen and senators were members of the Republican Party of that day. Democrats of that time were opposed to ending slavery and imposed laws called Black Codes to limit Black participation in all areas of life. Reconstruction was ultimately brought to an end and replaced by segregation, thus nullifying voting rights for Blacks. This made it virtually impossible for Black people in the South to be elected to any office. The practice existed until the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That was just 56 years ago. I thoroughly enjoyed today's show. If you want to be part of the conversation, go to Twitter or Facebook at All Things Men BNC. I'll see you next time.